This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media accounts, my columns, the Colorado Springs Independent, my photography website, all the other podcasts we've done. And also there's a contact me page there where you can click on that, send me a message, or sign up for my newsletter, which is free and comes out about once a week. So you can do all of that at hikingbob.com. And if you'd like to support this website, this podcast, my website, what the heck, it all comes in there. You can do that at Patreon, patreon.com/hikingbob, and I'd appreciate your support. Today with me is Britt Haley, who is and I'll let you describe your complete title, but basically, and what we're going to talk about today is you are the manager of the TOPS program. Hi, Britt.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And that's exactly right. I am the Trails, Open Space, and Parks Program Manager for the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services Department here in Colorado Springs.
Awesome. This is the 25th anniversary of the TOPS program starting this month here in April. So I guess let's start with the basics for people who may not be familiar with it. We have a very, a mobile community in Colorado Springs, and 25 years ago, a lot of people who are here now were not living here 25 years ago. I'm one of those people, but a lot of people are not. Tell us what the TOPS program is.
Sure. The TOPS program is a sales tax program that is essentially dedicates into a special fund 1 penny on every $10 of purchases in the city of Colorado Springs. And that dedicated fund allows us to purchase and take care of our open space properties around the city. And it allows us to buy trail corridor or easements and build trails. And it also allows us to enhance our parks. And that program was initiated by the citizens of Colorado Springs back in 1997 when the voters approved this program. So this April of 2022, we are essentially saying thank you to Colorado Springs because many people have been doing investments all across our city and not even knowing it whenever they purchase items and contribute to this dedicated fund, that 1 penny on every $10.
And the city has grown a lot in that 25 years. I've been here about 30 years, and I've seen it grow quite a bit. Is it fair to say that without this TOPS program, as the city has expanded, both physically, bigger footprint, and with a lot more people, that we would not have some of the recreational opportunities that people are now enjoying in the city if we did not have this TOPS program?
You are absolutely right about that. And back in 1997, there were several communities that were experiencing rapid growth and realizing that having some open space to balance that for the community was a valuable thing. And Colorado Springs was one of the first cities to adopt this kind of sales tax to allow us to really provide that balance. And at the time, the very first purchase was the Stratton open space, and that was scheduled to be really beautiful homes and residential development. But the city TOPS program was able to acquire that space. Another example is Red Rock Canyon open space, which was envisioned to be a big resort and hotel and convention center. And that property luckily was acquired by the TOPS program, again, with a lot of help from citizens and, of course, dependent on the sales and use tax to make that possible so that people can now enjoy that open space. And even as recently as last year with 2 purchases, one at Fisher's Canyon, which was slated for 71 homes on the west side of Colorado Springs in the Broadmoor Bluffs area. I mean, we can just name a lot of places that have really provided that balance and provided trails and open space and that experience for our community. I think City of Colorado Springs since 1997, because it has this program, has been able to really preserve for our community a ring of open space that preserves our Western Mountain backdrop, was a significant contributor to the property that now forms Cheyenne Mountain State Park right in our backyard, and really allows our community to have something special that would have been forever lost if the sales and use tax was not in place.
So let's talk about a couple of things about the history of the TOP program. It was initiated by citizens, so I guess they petitioned it onto the ballot to ask the voters to approve. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So it was a grassroots effort. And I think that's important because it showed us what our values were as a community. And we still have those values. We know that from all of the people who appreciate what we have now, but are asking for more in light of the continuing development that our city is seeing toward the east side now. And we are projected by 2050 to be the largest metropolitan area in the whole state of Colorado. So it shows that 1997 was visionary, and today we still have those same desires and needs.
Has the program, I imagine if it's like a lot of other programs or a lot of special taxes that we get in Colorado Springs, they have a deadline. Very few of these things are forever. And you could argue the benefits that I, as a voter and a taxpayer, I kind of like that you ask me every once in a while, hey, do you still want to do this? 25 years, has this been reapproved at some point? Has it been modified by the voters at some point? How has that worked over the last 25 years?
So over the course of the past 25 years, the TOPS tax has been extended one time, and it now is scheduled to expire December 31st of 2025. And I think one thing that our community appreciates about that is that it has a dedicated use. And so they know that that money is going to this particular use and it won't be siphoned off into some other city need. But they also know that they'll be asked again to evaluate the program and to determine what it's done for the community and whether we should keep it in place. And I think our citizens in particular like to have those checks and balances.
I certainly do as a voter and like I said, as a taxpayer, I certainly do like having those features built in there. Let me go back a step here. You talked about different properties that are now part of the TOPS, I want to say portfolio, I guess is a good word for it, and how they were slated to be a development here, a development there. How does that process work where the program buys a property? We're not using like eminent domain. You talked about a place that could have been a development. We didn't go in and snatch that out from underneath the developer, right? I mean, how does that process work?
No, and that's another thing that is one of my favorite aspects of TOPS is that we only work with people who own property that want to sell it to the city. And oftentimes the program is in competition with everyone else who wants to buy that property. We may be able to appeal to a property owner's sense of legacy because they'd like to provide something to the community. But the other thing that we do is we always purchase at fair market value. So we're not trying to undermine anybody's property value. We just want to be in the conversation if it's available for sale. So often there are competing uses and there are competing outcomes, and our outcome is more appealing to a property owner in many cases. But we always go through an appraisal process. We have a citizen committee that's called the TOPS Working Committee that helps me evaluate those proposals from myself as a program manager and landowners who are willing to sell. And then it goes to a Parks Advisory Board, which again evaluates those proposals, and then on to City Council if we find that those are meaningful acquisitions that we ought to be pursuing. So I think it's a really strong program, not only on behalf of the property owners because they get fair market value and have this wonderful legacy, but also a lot of methodology that protects the taxpayers and our sales tax program as well to make sure that we're really targeting the right places for this kind of protection.
And I think that's the best part of this program is that anybody who sells property to the city does it because they want to. They, like you said, this probably would be better as a park or an open space or a trail than it would be as something else. and it's completely up to them. They don't have to sell it to the city, and I kind of like that part of it. Obviously, I would like that they decide to make it a park or something, but I kind of appreciate that it's their decision to make, and if they're willing to sell and the program thinks it's worthy enough. Obviously, we don't want to buy a Superfund site or something like that. That would kind of be a bad idea, but I kind of like that there's many steps involved. I don't want to dwell too much on the weeds in this, but I think it's important for people to understand how this program works. Give us some ideas of some of the big successes. You kind of hinted at a few places, but some of the big successes over the last 25 years in this program.
Well, I think every time as I am going into work and I look up at our mountain backdrop under Pikes Peak, what a beautiful city we have. And we have some properties that are absolutely at the same level as a national park or a national monument. They're so amazing. And that was made possible in many cases by the TOPS program. So I mentioned Cheyenne Mountain State Park, I mentioned Stratton Open Space, but on the eastern side of our city, we have the equally beautiful Blue Stem Prairie Open Space, which has some really nice trails that when the mountain backdrop is too wet and muddy, which isn't the case this year so far, unfortunately, but often Blue Stem will provide different opportunities for folks who want to experience those trails and those views. It's right next to a reservoir site. It is just a gorgeous property. We have the Blodgett Open Space, which was purchased from local community members, and it is just a really nice views. You get up on some of these properties and they have incredible views of the city. And so whatever you like about a property, I think we probably have something to offer. And there are certainly opportunities around to augment that system as well.
I think one of the properties you mentioned is probably the most popular would be Red Rock Canyon Open Space. Obviously, it's huge, and you go by there on any weekend for sure, and then even most weekdays in the summer, and the parking lot is just full, and there's a couple of different entrances, and it is just full because it has just about everything you'd want in there, I guess the best way to describe it. And it connects. What I like about Red Rock Canyon is it connects. You go back in there and you hit section 16, then you go back further, you hit the National Forest, and you go back further and you just keep going.
Oh, there's no question that Red Rock Canyon is highly popular and it's very accessible. It has beautiful rock formations. It has a variety of kinds of trails. And I think it's one of those that is just a fan favorite. Another one I'd mention is Ute Valley Park, which used to be a Hewlett-Packard campus. And we were able to buy 204 acres to connect to a regional park at Ute Valley, and people really enjoy the rock formations there, the trail variety, and the beautiful scenery at that location as well. So we've managed to get some real gems for the community. And boy, am I proud to, every time I see them, I think, wow, what a wonderful resource.
They're really great parks. You kind of mentioned a couple of places that are recent purchases, such as Fisher's Canyon. That was a very recent purchase just in the last year. Tell us about where that is and what the vision of that one is.
Sure. So Fisher's Canyon is the most recent open space acquisition, and it actually shares a boundary with the Cheyenne Mountain State Park on the west side of the city behind really the Broadmoor Bluffs area, and it backs right all up the mountainside to the Pike National Forest. So this property is 343 acres large. It was, as I said earlier, slated for development. And it also includes a trail connection for the Chamberlain Trail that would connect all the way from Cheyenne Mountain State Park to the U.S. Air Force Academy. Like, that's the breadth of where this trail will be able to go ultimately. And this property was a key connection for that trail. But it also has the opportunity to connect up the mountain to Cheyenne Mountain State Park's top of the mountain trail and to the McNeil Trail on the U.S. Forest Service property. So it's got all of these connection opportunities. It's absolutely beautiful with ponderosa pine trees and sweeping meadows and irises blooming in the spring. And I think when people have the opportunity to enjoy that property, they're just going to be stunned by how wonderful it is, but also because it connects to other investments that we've made with the TOPS program.
I can't wait for that area to be developed because I volunteer a lot at Cheyenne Mountain State Park. I do the Dixon Trail to the top of Cheyenne Mountain, and one of the things I've always dreamt of is being able to go up the top, and then come back down on the McNeil Trail and come out on the other side. And I think eventually this will be that connection. I think a lot of people will find that to be a pretty exciting, a long day, but a pretty exciting hike up and over the top of the mountain. And you just can't really do that right now, or you certainly can't do it easily. A lot of these properties are on the west side of town, and it kind of makes sense. It backs up to the National Forest. It's a more rugged area. It's harder to develop. What's been going on the east side? I know we have. Well, let's talk about Corral Bluffs. That has an interesting history. That has not turned out the way anybody expected, and that's not a bad thing. It's actually turned out to be pretty significant. Tell us about the Corral Bluffs on the east side of town.
Yes, sometimes properties end up having a surprising outcome. And Corral Bluffs, the city has been acquiring property around that area since about 2008. And prior to 2008, there was a push at the county level to have a motorbike park for dirt bikes. And there was a citizens group again that rose up and said, hey, wait a minute, there's something really special here that maybe you don't know about. And that is the fact that it's a significant research site for fossils. And it turns out that at Corral Bluffs, in fact, the Denver Museum of Nature and Science and the Smithsonian Institute, over years and years and years of study, kind of unlocked the secret to understanding not only where the fossils were, but how to identify them. And I think it was in 2020, the scientific paper was allowed to be published in the Journal of Science, explaining that what's there actually shows the first mammals that emerged after the catastrophic asteroid disaster that killed off all the dinosaurs. And when the dinosaurs died off, and there was this period of recovery on the planet, the first things to really emerge from that devastating landscape were these little tiny mammals. And we have full skeletons at Corral Bluffs, which are found nowhere else on the face of the planet so far, that really document that gap in the fossil record. So Corral Bluffs has turned out to be one of those spaces that, because the open space program was able to acquire it, will be able to serve as not only an open space for the community to enjoy, but one of these educational and research opportunities that might be unparalleled. It was identified by the science community as the second most significant scientific discovery in that year, and second only to mapping a black hole. So my goodness, what an amazing property. So ever since 2008, we have been acquiring connections to that property to make it the kind of space that can accommodate all of the open space opportunities we have, but it really is unique in that discovery. And if you want to know more, boy, go to the Nova channel and watch this program called Rise of the Mammals, which documents the process for the discovery and what it means. It is just fascinating.
Yeah, and like you said, who knew, right? I mean, when we bought that property, it was like, yeah, it's just gonna be, we'll do something with this as we go along and make it recreational. All of a sudden, it got this significant scientific discovery on it. It's exciting. I mean, it's like, if that had become a bike park, and this is nobody's fault because nobody knew, probably would have ended up in a landfill someplace, and nobody would have even known that those items, those fossils and these artifacts were even there.
Boy, you think about that. And the other thing about Corral Bluffs is it's not that alone. I mean, it has this historical context. It was named Corral Bluffs because of the Goodnight Loving Trail, where the cattle barons would do cattle drives all the way up from Texas to Denver to load the cattle onto the rail yards. And they would stop at Corral Bluffs because of the box canyons where you could secure the cattle overnight. And there's a neighboring property called Jimmy Camp Creek. And this was a significant trading center, and it had live water from springs all of the time. And so, boy, those were significant historical properties as well. And I also want to mention that Native Americans and the first humans that were here on the plains before even the United States was discovered used these properties for those very same reasons. We've got these big mesas where you can see far and wide. You've got the trading areas, you've got the water, and these treed areas that provide shelter. And so there's a lot of significance to the Corral Bluffs area because of that. And we found a lot of interesting artifacts beyond the fossil record that truly make it a unique and interesting place.
I think it's exciting that that this site has developed into that. Is there? I imagine we're working with people who have a whole lot more resource than the city does to preserve these things. I mean, we have staff archaeologists, but we do not have the staff like the Denver Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian. Are we working with people to make sure we preserve these artifacts and these sites so that as I guess eventually that becomes recreational, we don't damage these things?
One of the things that we have in our favor is the fact that we can start on a clean slate essentially and do it right, and to make a conscientious effort and to work with those subject matter experts who can best assist us. And so we have, over a long, long time, even predating the purchase of Corral Bluffs area properties for the open space program, worked with scientists from the Smithsonian Institute, scientists from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, who are our chief scientific partner at this point on those efforts. We're working with the National Geographic Society as well. We also, Corral Bluffs, a certain part of it has been identified by the state as part of the Natural Areas Program because of its unique flora and fauna. And so those scientists and specialists come out and review the conservation values on the property periodically. So we do have a large set of subject matter experts that help us with each of those different areas of expertise. And that does help us prepare for the conscientious approach to opening that property to the public.
If we're going to do it, we got to do it right. And like you said, we fortunately found those. I guess it's fortunate we found those artifacts and that history before it was open. So we're not trying to scramble in and pull back. We can start with, but we know we need to protect this, and let's do that. Then we'll work on the rest of it. I guess that worked to our advantage that happened before it was actually open to the public.
Oh, I think so. There are a lot of times where you hear about properties like Chaco Canyon, which were the reverse happened, right? And so a lot of the artifacts and important finds were gone by the time that those scientists and experts could get there. So I think we have a unique opportunity, and we're trying to make the most of it. The challenge we have is a limited budget with all of that opportunity, and trying to make sure that we marshal those resources to do right by the properties. But we don't want to miss an opportunity for an important acquisition that might otherwise be developed into homes or some other use. And so we're trying to make that balance work out. And that's why it's so critical to have a citizen committee help out, the Parks Board help out, and City Council and the public to comment on all of these things, because it really is a very sensitive balance that the program has to strike between taking care of what we have and securing those things that could forever be lost.
Sure. You talked a little bit about budget, so let's talk about that a little bit, because I'm sure people want to know. How much money does the TOPS program take in on a yearly basis? And I know obviously it goes up and down and stuff, but what's it take in on a yearly basis?
Well, last year it took in about 11.6 million. And over the course of the 25 years, that has contributed or invested in our community about 160 million. So you think about those pennies adding up, boy, they really have provided over that long course of time for some real opportunity. So it's a fair amount of money to work with, and it sounds like a lot until you distribute it across the entirety of our city, the trail corridors, the parks that need help, and the open space opportunities. And recently, our Parks Department had an outside third-party study done of all of our infrastructure needs. And what we learned from that is that with the existing park facilities, we have a really significant backlog of deferred maintenance everywhere to the tune of over $270 million. So that 11.6, is partly dedicated to taking care of things that we have to take care of to make places safe, and partly dedicated to taking advantage of these opportunities before they're forever gone. So it's been wonderful, and we're super thankful to have it. And that's why this 25th anniversary is really a thank you to the citizens of Colorado Springs who made it possible.
And that backlog isn't just, that's all the park's own property. So it's not just properties that the TOPS program has purchased over the 25 years. It is everything that is out there. And not all that is necessarily the responsibility per se of the TOPS program. Is that correct?
That's correct, but the TOPS has a category that's dedicated to parks, and that category is limited to 20% of those revenues after administration and maintenance costs. So it's the only category, the parks category is the only one that can address all of our parks with that limited funding. And so you can see how the pressure builds up in a place with a lot of deferred maintenance, because it's really those built parks that end up getting damaged and need repairs and need all of the work done. So we often see a lot of pressure there. The open space category, on the other hand, is dedicated 60% of those funds, and it can be distributed to either acquisition or to stewardship of the properties. And so the open space category tends to have more capacity than perhaps the parks category, and it's pretty probably easy to see why that's the case, because open spaces don't take as much maintenance effort. They don't require as much infrastructure, and people enjoy them just the way they are. And that's one of the best things about open space, is that you go there because those features are the things that attract you there.
You just want a wild and kind of natural kind of setting, as opposed to groomed grasses and other things. You just want to go out there and just
experience nature.
There you go.
Its pure form, right?
There you go.
It's wonderful to be able to do that, and the open space category does seem to have the capacity to do that.
Is there pretty consistently properties that are on a list that people present to you and eventually to everybody else to purchase? Is that kind of a constant thing? Is there always something next on the horizon for the program to purchase?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of a balance between opportunities that come in from interested sellers, and then my work as the program manager to seek out opportunities before perhaps another contractor comes in and tries to purchase them. So what we've done in the past is a broad planning process that identifies candidate open space areas. And certainly you wouldn't want to buy all of the candidate open space, but the goal would be to connect all of these properties in a ring around our city so that every resident has some access to a really wonderful open space property for all of those values that we see in open space trails and parks. So based on that candidate open space status, which has all of the wildlife features, it has the interesting archaeological or landform features, it provides connectivity, then the TOPS working committee, which is made up of 9 citizens, helps me to narrow down where we should be shopping or looking in order to make the best experience for the city of Colorado Springs. And then the Parks Board, which is advisory to both the department and council, further reviews that, and we take things to council for purchase, which have really been vetted through that long process of review and prioritization. So when an opportunity pops up, we've got this structure in place to evaluate it, and we can respond as quickly as any government entity can, which isn't always as responsive as maybe the private sector, but certainly gets a lot more review and consideration from a lot of people with individual expertise that otherwise wouldn't be available.
And let's talk about a little bit about the citizen involvement part of it, because to me, this is what's really important with this. And it seems like, and I come from the East Coast, where pretty much your park was wherever the government told you the park was going to be, and if you didn't like it, well, that's just too bad. Here in the West, we like more citizen involvement. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But one of the things I want to touch on first is how the very first step in TOPS considering to buy a property, who makes that first presentation to you? For example, hey, this is a piece of property that you should have. Do you initiate that, or does a citizen have to initiate that, or the property owner? How does that work at first?
Well, we actually have an application process, and it's only a page and a half. It doesn't take a lot of work to do it. But if a person would like to nominate a property, even if they don't own it and they don't know it's for sale and they just want us to consider it, any person can fill out this application to start that review process. Now, I can tell you that it's usually really successful if they've already talked to the property owner is aware and willing to sell, and it has conservation values, because oftentimes, people might love a piece of property, but it's, under development already, or it's too late for us to get in on that process, or it's too small. For open space, we need at least a minimum of 8 acres or more in order for it to qualify. And it's always best if it can be in a candidate open space area that has been evaluated for all of those values that really make it open space. But anyone can submit this application, and I'd be happy to provide it to anyone who wants to. Sometimes, though, the TOPS working committee members will tell me, or a subject matter expert will tell me, there's a property near Corral Bluffs. It would provide that connectivity that you need so that people could access the property from Highway 94, for example. And they'll suggest it to me, and I will pursue it. And to the extent that I end up being successful with the property owner, then we both jointly submit the same application for review. And that triggers the TOPS working committee's process to evaluate that opportunity.
Great. It's good to know that that's how that works. That this is, again, going back to citizen driven. How else can people, the average citizen, be involved in the TOPS program and the administration of it and all this kind of stuff? How else can that happen?
Well, I think one way that people are involved, and like I said, they may not even know it, is that they are currently land investors whenever they purchase something in the city of Colorado Springs. So just be aware that that penny really is going to a very good purpose, and it's being very carefully monitored and used for that purpose. Second of all, we know that this program will be expiring in 2025. And at some point, there will be a ballot question to residents of city of Colorado Springs to ask for that to either be extended or changed in some manner. So keep an eye out to support that extension if you really enjoy open spaces, parks, and trails, because we've done a lot in 25 years, and you can look all around the city and see TOPS influence on those wonderful amenities. I'd like to do another 25 years of those very same things as our city grows to provide the trails, parks, and open spaces that we will need as our community continues to grow.
And it kind of goes to the next question I was going to ask you about what the future of the TOPS program is. I guess right now the future is extending it so that we can keep this program alive and keep doing the work that it's been doing.
Exactly, to keep it alive. But some of the things that it does that people might not necessarily know is that one of its purposes is really focused on water and water conservation. And we know with the dry west and the drought conditions that we experience, that water conservation is hugely important. Another thing that we want to focus on for the next 25 years is really that east side balance. You'd mentioned before, we've had some wonderful acquisitions on the western side of the city, but certainly there are opportunities on the eastern side as well. And everybody should have, I kind of say that equity of opportunity in terms of open space and recreational opportunities, so that you don't have to drive 20 minutes in order to enjoy one of our amazing spaces. You can if you want, and I do routinely, but boy, wouldn't it be great if you're just able to take 5 minutes and end up in a beautiful place where you can enjoy a trail and then go about your day. Finally, and I think this is significant to almost every citizen in the city of Colorado Springs, forest health, and really that forest fire prevention. If we ring our city with open space, we know that we've got that place where we can take care of it to reduce fire hazards, but also where we can combat fires before they get to our community. And there was a really good example of that happening during our Waldo Canyon fire, where we had some open spaces where we could really buffer and get to the fire ahead. And so one of those places that we recently worked on a purchase is the Pikeview Quarry area. And we bought the buffer space that would have been, again, residential development. That was 2 years ago. But the quarry behind also stopped the fire from coming over the ridge and into the Oka Valley Ranch subdivision. So we know that these spaces provide so much more than just recreational opportunity. They provide wildlife habitat and diversity of those species. They provide for forest health. They provide for water quality. And so in the future, we know all of those things are valuable, continuing to be valuable. And so focusing on that along with the east side balancing of our opportunities is really something that I think would be valuable for the community, and people would continue to value themselves.
You mentioned, we've talked about how some of these properties were slated to be developed, and this is not an anti-development program, but if you think about it, and I'm going to tie that into what you also mentioned about water and the drought. If a lot of these properties had become places with 100, 1,000 houses, they would have been places that everybody wants a lawn. So now you got to come up with water to water the lawn. You have to supply water to these houses and sewage systems. And, the question, and it's become a thing, and I'm going to go off track just a little bit here, but not too much, is one of the big things facing the West right now is, where's the water going to come from? The water's drying up. You go look at the Colorado River downstream as it goes through Arizona, Nevada, and into California. It's kind of a good thing that these open spaces are remaining pretty natural. An open space is not like a park, so it doesn't get watered or anything like that. It's whatever happens naturally, and we manage it. So some of this, in a way, is also helping to manage these things that could be happening that are going to draw more water or deplete our resources at a quicker rate than is now. Like I said, this is not an anti-development program. The goal is not to stop development, but I think the other part of this is the water conservation and the natural resource conservation that comes out of this is pretty significant. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the messaging someplace, and not anybody's fault. It's just, everybody's more like, where can I go hiking next, instead of thinking about, how am I protecting our natural resources out there?
Well, it's funny because, you might go on your hike in the daytime and spend 3 hours, but that open space is working 24 hours a day to filter the storm water that may be coming from the city and to really heal, some of those uses. And so it's there all the time doing its job, and its job is so much more than just being a recreational place where people can enjoy and de-stress and enjoy nature. It provides wildlife a place to be. And I know a lot of people have been concerned about watching the antelope, being kind of shoved off to the east as development keeps moving, and where are they going to go? We're going to provide a place for them to go. And all of the various wildlife that rely on our resources that people really enjoy seeing. So when I think of it in terms of development, it's not anti-development. In fact, it supports our whole city being the unique place that it is because it balances and provides something unique. And one of the funny things that I've realized after being program director for a while is that even people who would never find themselves in an open space see value from it because their homes are more valuable when they're located near an open space, a park, or a trail. And we have studies that have shown those economic opportunities. So every citizen gets something out of it, even if they never visit the open space.
You're talking about the antelope, and earlier you had mentioned Blue Stem Prairie. Blue Stem Prairie, for the people who've been out there, has a bunch of antelope that live out there, and it's just gorgeous to see them, and right up against an urban area. And usually we're used to seeing those like on the long drive down I-25 through New Mexico where there's nothing for 100 miles, and to see them, it's kind of exciting to see them close to town where they found that little oasis that they can be in, and maybe that's keeping them from pushing them further out, that they can stay in this little spot there where there's water and there's the stuff they like to eat out there. Blue Stem Prairie, also a birder's place apparently, especially if you like to see raptors and stuff like that. And
lots of fascinating wildlife. And again, thank you to our citizens for making that a home for those animals. They can still be there so close to our city, and then we can teach our children about what it means to have that and how interesting it is from an educational standpoint.
Excellent. Well, if people want to get more information on the TOPS program and the 25th anniversary, which I think will be going on probably for the rest of the year, where can they find out more information on it?
Oh, there are so many places. One of the best is the City of Colorado Springs webpage. You can just type in TOPS and find our webpage and learn so much more about the program. We will also be having all kinds of celebration activities across the city. So watch our social media for both the Parks and Recreation Department and also the City of Colorado Springs for all of those opportunities to really celebrate what we have. And then, just take a look around you. There's an open space for everybody. There's a trail for everybody. And 66 of our parks all across the city have been enhanced by TOPS. So get out and take a look, and we will be doing a passport program where you can try to get as many of your properties on your passport as possible. So we're going to be celebrating in many different ways, and just look for those opportunities. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. Well, Britt, thank you so much for being on the podcast. There's a lot of good information here. And, here's to hoping that we get another 25 years out of this program. And I can't see why you wouldn't want to. I can see why anybody wouldn't want to. It's been so successful, and in doing what it was intended to do by the initial voters to purchase open space and preserve it and give us places to go. And I tell people this Colorado Springs would be a concrete jungle from one end to the other if we didn't have so many open spaces. And nobody wants to live in a place like that. I've seen places like that. They're no fun. So I'm glad we're not like that. And Britt, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening to the Outdoors with Hiking Bob podcast.
Are you ready for great music in the great outdoors? Hey there, Colorado Springs. I'm Nicole Nicoletta, Executive Director of Rocky Mountain Highway Music Collaborative. I'm here to personally invite you to join us at the 13th Annual Meadowgrass Music Festival. It happens this Memorial Day weekend, May 27th through the 29th in beautiful Black Forest, Colorado. 3 days of live, local, regional, and national music. It's family friendly. Kids 12 and under get in free with a paid adult. You can join us for the 4th Annual Meadowgrass Beer Festival, yoga, on-site camping, and a phenomenal collection of local food, retail, and alcohol vendors. Tickets and information at RockyMountainHighway.org, or you can visit our Meadowgrass Facebook page. You should really come see why Meadowgrass is considered the premier kickoff to summer in the Pikes Peak region.